A thunderous knock shattered the silence of her quiet morning. Porcelain teacup slipped from her hands, crashing into 1,000 pieces on the kitchen floor. Outside, a black envelope lay on the porch, soaked in rain and dread. Inside it, just one sentence, scrawled in shaky handwriting: "He never died. He's been waiting for you." Her heart stopped. Eyes wide, breath frozen. For 50 years, she mourned him. Buried him. Cursed the world that took him away. But now, everything she knew was a lie. And the truth would tear her world apart. They say the past always finds a way back. It sneaks up on you like a whisper in the dark or the creak of a floorboard when the house is still. And for Eleanor Reed, 81 years old and long retired from everything that once made life bright, the past didn't knock gently. It barged in. Her life in Belhaven, Maine, was quiet. Predictable. She rose with the sun, fed her birds, and spoke to no one except her little dog, Rufus, and the occasional neighbor who asked how she managed to keep her roses blooming so late in the season. Eleanor liked the silence. It protected her from memory. But that morning, rain dancing on the roof and a strong wind howling off the bay, it all changed. The knock. That envelope. Those words. "He never died. He's been waiting for you." She read it 20 times, each time her hands trembling worse than the last. Her breath caught in her throat. Her heart ached like it hadn't in decades. She sat at the kitchen table for hours, the black envelope beside her like a phantom. Her mind raced through 1,000 impossible questions. Was it a prank? A mistake? A cruel joke played by time? No. The handwriting. It was his. She would have known it anywhere. Slanted to the right. Sharp little hooks on every T. No one else wrote like Daniel. Daniel. His name hadn't passed her lips in nearly half a century. It felt like speaking to a ghost. They were high school sweethearts. Married by 20. Widowed by 30. Or so she believed. Daniel went missing during a fire at the Marlow paper mill in 1973. They never found a body, just a scorched wedding ring twisted into the frame of his locker. She buried it in a small oak box. Closed that chapter. Locked it away. Until now. That evening, Eleanor lit a fire she didn't need and sat watching the flames, her fingers dancing with the envelope like it might speak if she held it long enough. Rufus barked once, low and uneasy. Then the second knock came. She stood, spine stiff with old age and fear. She opened the door slowly. A man in a dark coat stood on her porch, rain dripping from his hat. He looked, not young, not old. Familiar and unfamiliar all at once. "I'm sorry to come unannounced," he said, voice deep and even. "I have information about your husband." No name. No smile. Just that one sentence that turned her knees to water. He stepped inside at her gesture, hat removed, gaze heavy with something too complex to name. "My name is Nathaniel Grant," he said. "I knew your husband. For a very long time." "How?" she asked, voice breaking. He hesitated. "I worked with him. On things I can't explain. He was never in that fire, Mrs. Reed. He disappeared. On purpose." Silence swallowed the room. Rufus growled low under the table. Eleanor blinked, once, twice. "Why?" Nathaniel leaned forward. "Because he was protecting you. And if he's alive now, then something has changed. And not for the better." 100 thoughts slammed into her mind like thunderclaps. But one crashed louder than the rest. "He never left me. He sacrificed everything." The man slid a photo across the table. Daniel. Gray-haired, older, but undeniably him. Standing in front of a house in the woods. Holding a bouquet of lilies. Eleanor pressed trembling fingers to her lips. Tears spilled. Quiet at first, then full and unashamed. She was 81. She had survived heartbreak, loss, 1,000 days with no one to share them. But nothing, prepared her for this moment. "What do I do?" she asked. Nathaniel stood, placing a worn map beside the photo. "You go to him. But be careful. Someone doesn't want that to happen. Someone, who's been watching." He tipped his hat and left as silently as he came. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. The letter, the photo, the map, all lined up beside her bed like puzzle pieces waiting for a hand. She thought of Daniel's hands. The way they smelled of sawdust and pine. The way he held her during winter storms. She reached beneath her bed and pulled out the little oak box. Inside, the warped wedding ring still rested in a bed of velvet. He had let her bury it. Bury him. To keep her safe. Tears slid down her cheeks. "I'm coming," she whispered. "If I have to crawl, I'm coming." But outside, hidden behind the elm tree across the street, a figure stood watching. Binoculars in hand. Breathing slow. Smiling. The photo Nathaniel gave her. Doctored. The man in it? Not Daniel. And Eleanor? She was walking into something far more dangerous than heartbreak. The next morning, Eleanor was already dressed before the sun crept over the horizon. Her suitcase sat at the foot of the bed, half open, with clothes folded so precisely you'd think she was preparing for a church retreat. But this wasn't a retreat. This was a resurrection. The photo and the map still lay on her nightstand. She studied them for the 100th time. The direction scribbled on the edge of the map led north, into the deep, unmarked stretches of timberland near Aroostook County. She'd never gone that far from Belhaven in her life. At 81, her bones ached from weather changes, and the cold bit sharper than it used to. But that didn't stop her. She loaded Rufus into the back of her old Lincoln Town car, clicked her seatbelt into place, and took one last look at the only home she'd known since 1971. "Stay alive, Daniel," she whispered. "One more day." Then she drove. The road narrowed the farther she went. Towns disappeared. Cell signal vanished. Snow lined the shoulders of the highway like quiet sentinels. Rufus whined once or twice, but mostly sat silent, ears perked, sensing that this wasn't just another trip to the vet. Around noon, she reached the edge of the forest. According to the map, there was a private road that split off a gravel trail. At the turn, she found a small wooden sign nailed to a tree. Willow Run. It wasn't on any modern map. But it was on hers. She turned in. The road twisted through pines so tall they seemed to hold up the sky. Eleanor could barely see ahead through the mist curling along the windshield. A branch scraped the side of her car like a fingernail. The GPS screen blinked, "No signal," in red letters. At the end of the road stood a house. 2 stories. Weathered. With ivy crawling up one side and a crooked stone chimney leaning like a tired soldier. The same house from the photo. She parked. Her breath trembled. The cold didn't help, but this wasn't the cold. She stepped out. The air was deathly still. She approached the porch, her cane thudding softly against the old planks. "Hello." Her voice wavered. "Is anyone here?" No answer. The door wasn't locked. Inside, the house smelled like cedar and dust. She passed through a living room where nothing had been touched in years. A clock ticked softly above the fireplace, though no one had wound it. On a small table sat a tin cup with a single lily inside. She gasped. The same kind Daniel would bring her every spring. That's when she heard it. A soft rustle upstairs. Floorboards creaking. Rufus growled low beside her, his ears pulled back. "Daniel," she called. "Is that you?" The creaking stopped. She took the first step up the stairs. Then another. Her hand shook against the banister. At the top of the landing, a hallway stretched into darkness. She turned slowly toward the nearest room. The door opened before she touched it. A figure stood there, cloaked in shadow. Tall. Gray-haired. Familiar. She dropped her cane. The man stepped into the light. But it wasn't Daniel. He was older, yes, and he wore a patch over one eye. Deep scars lined the right side of his face. But the nose, the jawline, there were traces. Maybe too many. The man blinked as if seeing a ghost. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Eleanor clutched her chest. "Where is he?" The man didn't answer. She stepped forward. "Please. I know he was here. I got the letter. The photo. Tell me he's alive." The man studied her carefully, like trying to remember something from long ago. Then he spoke, low and careful. "He was here. Not long ago. But he left. Said if someone ever came looking, they were already too late." Her heart collapsed inward. She stumbled back against the doorframe. "No. No, don't you do this to me. Not again." The man's expression softened. "I tried to stop him. But he had his reasons." She shook her head. "You knew him?" He nodded. "We served together. A long time ago." Her breath caught. "Then you know why he disappeared?" He looked at her a long moment. "Do you believe in secrets, Mrs. Reed?" "I've lived with one for 50 years. He nodded slowly. "Then you'll understand what I say next. Your husband didn't die in that fire. He faked it. Because he was part of something no one was supposed to survive." "What something?" she asked. Before he could answer, a loud crash exploded downstairs. Rufus barked frantically. The man's face changed, urgency, fear. "Get down," he shouted, pushing her behind the door just as glass shattered. A bullet punched through the wall beside her. Someone was outside. And they weren't here for tea. They crouched together behind the heavy oak bed. "Who's shooting at us?" she cried. "People who don't want the truth out," he said, loading a small revolver from the nightstand drawer. Her ears rang with adrenaline. In seconds, the front door burst open. Boots on floorboards. The man turned to her. "Do you trust me?" She nodded before thinking. "Good. Then run when I say so." Downstairs, someone shouted, "We only want the woman. The old man's expendable." Her heart stopped. How did they know her? And more importantly, why? The man looked her dead in the eyes. "Daniel knew they'd come. He said if anyone came asking about him, they'd come for you too." Eleanor stared in disbelief. "Why me?" But the man only said 3 words. "Because you remember." The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it began. Silence fell again, but it wasn't peace. It was that kind of silence that sits heavy on your shoulders, that makes you feel like the world's holding its breath. Eleanor crouched behind the bed, every muscle trembling. Her hearing buzzed. Her knees ached. And yet, she hadn't felt this alive in years. She turned toward the stranger beside her, the man who'd claimed to know her husband. He checked the cylinder of his revolver, jaw clenched. 3 shots left, he muttered. Outside the bedroom, a floorboard creaked. They were still here. "Why would anyone want me?" Eleanor whispered, her voice barely carrying. "I'm just an old woman." The man gave her a glance that bordered on pity. "That's the thing. You're not just anything. You're the key." Eleanor frowned. "The key to what?" The man paused. "To something your husband died protecting." "But he's not dead," she hissed. He didn't answer that. Didn't meet her eyes. That silence spoke louder than a scream. Then another voice echoed through the house. A woman's voice. Calm. Cold. Calculated. Eleanor, you're a long way from Belhaven, it called. You've come too far to walk away now. Let's talk. The man beside Eleanor stiffened. That voice, she whispered. I know that voice. A memory stirred. Faint. Smoky. A woman in a gray suit at Daniel's funeral. Not a mourner. A watcher. She never spoke. Just stood by the trees with sunglasses on, lips pressed tight. Eleanor hadn't thought of her in decades. Who is she? Eleanor asked. The man exhaled slowly. They called her Viola back then. She ran the files. The disappearances. She buried the truth deeper than anyone else ever could. If she's here. He didn't finish. Outside the door, Viola's voice was closer now. You're probably wondering why you were left behind. Why Daniel disappeared. Why the lies were so perfect. Eleanor's hands balled into fists. Tell me. Now. Before they take me too. The man looked at her. You remember the Marlowe fire? Of course I do, she snapped. It took everything. No, he said. It hid everything. The fire was a cover-up. Daniel wasn't the only one they made disappear. There were 8 men in that building. None of them died. They were taken. Taken where? Underground. Black sites. Test programs. Behavioral shielding. He volunteered to disappear, to protect something. Protect what? The man turned to her now, eyes wet with something like regret. You. And the child you never knew you had. Her heart slammed. She felt the room tilt. No, she whispered. You were pregnant when he left, the man said. You were told you lost the baby. It wasn't true. Eleanor shook her head violently. That can't be, Daniel and I, we tried for years. He pulled something from his pocket. A photo. Worn, stained. It showed a toddler standing beside a man with his back turned. A cabin in the background. The child had her nose. Her eyes. No, Eleanor said again, but it was weaker now. Her voice cracked. This isn't real. They told you the child died in delivery. It was easier than letting you be used as leverage. Daniel made a deal to protect you both. But something went wrong. They took the child anyway. The floor creaked again. Then the voice returned, just beyond the door. You're not safe with him, Eleanor. He's told you half-truths. I can show you your daughter. Eleanor's breath stopped. Daughter. She turned to the man beside her, the man who'd brought her this far. Is it true? His eyes flicked away. Yes. But she's not with Viola. That woman lies for a living. She'll use your daughter to draw you out. Eleanor stood slowly. Her knees buckled. He reached to help, but she pulled away. I've been lied to for 50 years. By doctors, priests, friends. Maybe even by you. But I'm done sitting in the dark. Then she walked to the door and opened it. Outside the hallway, 3 armed men turned toward her. At the end of the hall stood Viola, dressed in gray, her hands clasped like a mourner at a wake. Her hair was silver now, but her face hadn't changed. Eleanor, she said with a ghost of a smile. I told them you were stronger than they thought. Eleanor didn't blink. Where is she? Viola tilted her head. She's safe. For now. I want proof. Viola reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She tossed it onto the floor between them. Eleanor picked it up. It was a drawing. Crayon on paper. A little girl standing beside a cabin. A dog. And a woman with white hair. Me, Eleanor thought. She drew me. On the bottom was scrawled, to the lady in the photograph. I think you're my mom. Tears broke like a dam. Where is she? Eleanor asked again, voice breaking. She's in custody, Viola said. Under observation. You can see her, if you come with us. But only you. Not the man behind you. He's compromised. The man stepped forward, revolver half raised. You take her, she disappears forever, he growled. Viola didn't flinch. And if she stays with you, she dies tonight. Eleanor turned to the man. Is this true? Is she alive? He nodded. But if I go with them? You'll never come back. A lifetime of choices narrowed to one moment. A mother's heart, once broken, now aflame. Eleanor stepped forward. I'm going with her. The man reached for her arm, desperate. Please. Let me go, she said. If she's alive, I have to see her. Even if it's just once. She let Viola take her hand. The guards closed in. As they walked her down the stairs, she looked back only once. The man was still there, frozen in the hallway, gun lowered, eyes filled with something worse than fear, loss. But he wasn't the only one watching. Outside the house, beyond the trees, in the growing dusk. A shadow moved. Someone else was out there. And they were watching her every step. The car ride was silent. Eleanor sat in the back seat of a dark SUV, flanked by two men who didn't speak, didn't blink. Viola sat up front, staring straight ahead like a ghost driving into nothing. They drove for hours, past towns Eleanor didn't recognize, through thick forest roads that narrowed and curved like arteries. At one point, they passed a checkpoint, guarded by a man in a white coat instead of a uniform. He gave Eleanor a brief glance, then nodded once, and the gate opened. They entered what looked like a military facility buried into the side of a mountain. The SUV rolled into a tunnel, swallowed by concrete and shadows. No one said a word. Inside, the air turned cold. Not from temperature, but from atmosphere. A sterile, dead kind of cold that lived in old hospitals and abandoned wards. Everything echoed. Eleanor was led through long corridors. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A nurse passed her in silence, eyes avoiding contact. At last, they stopped at a small room with a metal door. This is it, Viola said. Eleanor turned toward her, heart pounding like a trapped bird. She's inside. Viola nodded. But I must warn you, she doesn't know who you are. She only knows the story we gave her. Eleanor's breath caught. What story? That her parents died in the fire. That she was a ward of the state. That she's a research subject. Subject? Viola's eyes didn't flinch. She's special. Her memory capacity, her intuition, off the charts. Your husband believed she could remember things before she could speak. That kind of mind doesn't just happen. Eleanor gritted her teeth. You stole her. We protected her, Viola corrected. From enemies who would have used her like a tool. Your husband saw what she could become. That's why he gave her up. Eleanor turned toward the door. Open it. Viola obliged. Inside the room, a young woman sat at a table, sketching. She was no longer a child, perhaps in her 30s, but there was something in her face, something Eleanor saw in the mirror every morning. The same eyes. The same quiet sadness. She looked up when Eleanor entered. They stared at each other in silence. You're the lady from the picture, the woman said. Eleanor's voice broke. Yes. Yes, I am. I drew you. I know. A long pause. Then. Why? Eleanor took a breath. Because I think I'm your mother. The woman didn't speak. Didn't cry. Just blinked, once, and said, that can't be true. They told me my parents died. I know what they told you, Eleanor whispered, stepping closer. But they lied. All of them. You were taken from me. And I never stopped feeling the hole you left. The woman looked down at the sketch. I don't remember you. I know. Then how can you be my mother? Eleanor reached into her coat and pulled out the old wedding ring. She placed it on the table. Because I kept this. Through every lie. Every lonely year. For the day I'd see you again. The woman stared at the ring. Then her hand moved, slowly, across the table. She touched it with her fingertip. Suddenly, her face changed. A shudder ran through her. And then. I remember. The room fell silent. Her breath caught. I remember, a man. He smelled like cedar. He sang when he thought I was asleep. He held me close and said, "You're going to do great things, little one." Tears filled her eyes. I thought it was a dream. It wasn't, Eleanor whispered. That was your father. The woman's voice cracked. Why didn't you come for me? I didn't know you were alive. They both cried. Soft. Quiet. But the kind of crying that empties years of pain from a soul. Then the lights flickered. A voice boomed from the intercom above. Subject 12 has activated long-term recall. Initiate containment protocol. The woman's face changed. No, she whispered. They'll take me away again. Eleanor stood. I won't let them. The door burst open. Viola entered, calm as ever. She's remembering things she shouldn't, she said. Things even we couldn't access. We need to move her. You'll touch her over my dead body, Eleanor said. Viola's lips tightened. If she stays, her mind will collapse under the weight of the memories. She's not your experiment, Eleanor said. She's my daughter. Then save her, Viola said coldly. Tell her to forget. Or watch her break. The woman stood. I don't want to forget. She looked Eleanor in the eyes. I remember more. A cabin. A dog. Someone, watching. Eleanor paled. What do you mean? Someone outside the window. Every night. They wore a coat. They had a scar on their face. Eleanor froze. The man from the cabin. The one who brought her here. You mean him? She asked. No. Not him. He was kind. Then who? The lights cut out. The facility went dark. Sirens blared. An alarm voice screamed, breach in Sector 4. Unknown entity inside. Viola drew a gun from her coat. This is what I warned you about, she hissed. Eleanor shielded her daughter. Who is it? She asked. Viola's face was pale. The one who sent the letter. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Daniel? Viola didn't answer. Then the intercom crackled again. Code Indigo. He's alive. Somewhere in the darkened corridors of the mountain. A man walked. Steady. Focused. Gray hair. Leather gloves. Eyes like thunder. And in his hand. The second half of a wedding ring. For 50 years, Daniel Reed had been a ghost. Some said he died in the Marlow fire. Others whispered he went underground, working for something darker than the military, deeper than the government. But none of them knew the truth. Daniel never stopped watching. Never stopped waiting. And tonight, after half a lifetime in shadows, he was coming home. The emergency lights in the facility pulsed red. Eleanor gripped her daughter's hand, pulling her close as sirens howled through the corridor. Guards scrambled past the glass room, radios crackling, weapons drawn. The door was sealed from the outside, locking them in together with Viola. "Open it!" Eleanor shouted. "I can't," Viola snapped, scanning her device. "He's hacked the mainframe." Nothing responds. "You mean Daniel?" Viola turned sharply. "Whatever he is now, he's not the man you remember." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "You don't get to say his name." But something in Viola's voice caught her attention. Not fear, no, Viola didn't fear much, but uncertainty. Like she was dealing with a force even she hadn't prepared for. "Why now?" Eleanor asked. "Why come back after all this time?" Viola hesitated. "Because of her." She looked at the young woman beside Eleanor, the daughter neither of them truly knew yet. She stood perfectly still, her face blank, as if listening to something far away. "He's not coming for you," Viola said slowly. "He's coming for her." She triggered something. Memories she shouldn't have. "I didn't try," the daughter whispered. "It just started. When I touched the ring." "Exactly," Viola muttered. "That ring is encoded." "Encoded?" Eleanor asked. "Not with data. With memory." Eleanor blinked. "You mean like, her memory?" Viola nodded. "Or his." Suddenly, the walls around them shook. A low rumble groaned through the foundation. Lights flickered, then died again. In the distance, footsteps. Slow. Measured. Heavy. Getting closer. Viola pulled her weapon. "When he opens this door, I need you to stay behind me." Eleanor shook her head. "If that's Daniel, I will stand in front of him." "He may not recognize you," Viola said grimly. "Or her." A pause. "Then he'll remember this." Eleanor pulled the chain from around her neck, revealing a small photo, black and white, frayed at the corners. It was their wedding photo. Young. Smiling. A moment before the world fell apart. The door hissed. Unsealed. Steam rolled in like breath from a dragon's mouth. And then he stepped inside. Daniel. Older. Scarred. Eyes as sharp as they ever were. But changed. Hardened by silence. Etched with grief. His eyes scanned the room, landing first on Viola, then flicking past her to Eleanor. He stopped. Stared. Eleanor stepped forward. Her voice shook. "Danny." Nothing. Not a blink. Not a breath. Just silence. She held out the photo with both hands. He stared at it. The silence stretched. Then, a whisper, ragged, dry. "Ellie." Her knees buckled. She caught herself on the wall, tears flooding her eyes. He stepped closer. "I wasn't sure it was you," he said. "They said you died." "They said you died," she sobbed. "And our daughter." He turned slowly, eyes locking on the young woman behind her. He looked at her like a man seeing a sunrise after 50 years underground. "Sarah." The woman flinched. "They called me Subject 12. His fists clenched. "No," he growled. "That's not who you are." He stepped closer, hands trembling. "I used to sing to you. Before you could speak. I called you Little Owl. Because you'd stare at me with those big eyes and never blink." She gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. "I remember that." Viola aimed her gun. "Don't move." Daniel didn't even flinch. "You took everything from me," he said, voice low and cutting. "My wife. My daughter. My name. I became what you wanted, a weapon. But I never forgot." I protected the program, Viola hissed. You volunteered. I volunteered to disappear, Daniel said. Not to have my family erased. The room swelled with silence. Eleanor moved between them. No more lies. No more secrets. No more fear. Daniel looked at her. She reached out, gently, hesitantly, and touched his cheek. Warm. Real. Alive. They fell into each other's arms, a sob bursting from Eleanor's chest so deep it shook the walls of the room. Then. A click. Viola's gun. Daniel turned too late. But Sarah moved faster. With a burst of impossible speed, she knocked the weapon from Viola's hand. It skittered across the floor. Everyone froze. Sarah stood over it. Breathing hard. And then. She told me I was broken, she said. But maybe. I'm just starting to remember who I am. Viola lunged for the gun. Daniel raised his arm. A shot rang out. But it wasn't Viola's. She fell to the ground, gasping. Behind her, the man from the cabin. He stood in the doorway, pistol still smoking. Daniel's face changed. You. The man stepped forward. I told you I'd bring them together, he said. I never stopped trying. Even when you stopped believing. Eleanor gasped. You knew he was alive? The man nodded. I helped him escape. Faked the death report. Watched over you from a distance. Daniel looked stunned. Why? Because you saved my life once. And this was how I repaid it. Viola lay gasping, blood pooling beneath her. Daniel knelt beside her. For a moment, no one spoke. She looked up at him, eyes dimming. I kept her safe, she whispered. No, he said softly. You kept her caged. She didn't respond again. That night, Daniel, Eleanor, and Sarah walked out of the facility together. Free. They didn't speak much. Words weren't needed. Sarah walked between them, holding each of their hands like she'd always known how. The man from the cabin walked behind them, silent. The moon lit their path as they disappeared into the trees. A family, once broken, now whole. But just as they reached the edge of the forest, Sarah stopped. She turned to Daniel. There's one more memory, she said. What is it? She looked up at the stars. I remember, someone else. Watching. Always watching. Daniel's face darkened. Eleanor touched her daughter's shoulder. Who, sweetheart? Sarah whispered. I think it's the real enemy. And I don't think they're done. They didn't speak of Viola again. Not that night, not the next day, not even after they reached the small cabin tucked deep in the mountains, where Daniel had hidden for the past 15 years. The air was clean there. Untouched. A place where the world felt paused, like time was holding its breath just for them. Daniel chopped wood with slow, steady rhythm. Eleanor brewed tea on the old stovetop. Sarah sat by the window, sketching what she saw, trees, birds, the outline of her father's profile in the distance. It could have been peace. It could have been an ending. But something still lived in the shadows of Sarah's mind. And when the wind howled just right, she remembered. That morning, while Daniel slept and Eleanor napped in the chair beside the fire, Sarah walked alone through the trees. She paused at a clearing. It wasn't much, just moss and pine needles, but something about it itched in her memory. She knelt and brushed the earth. And that's when she found it. A small, rusted pendant. Shaped like a feather. Etched with a symbol she'd drawn dozens of times in her dreams. She picked it up, and the moment she touched it, everything came back. Not just memories of her father, or the house she was raised in, or the songs whispered in the dark. But another face. One with no eyes. Only a voice. She dropped the pendant and stumbled backward, gasping. Behind her, Daniel appeared. "What is it?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "I remembered him," she whispered. Daniel's face tightened. "Who?" "The one who came after you vanished. He visited me in the facility. Never spoke. Just watched. They called him the witness." Daniel's hand went to the knife at his belt. That name was never supposed to resurface. Eleanor arrived then, out of breath. "What happened?" Sarah held up the pendant. Eleanor stared. Then gasped. "I've seen that before," she said, voice shaking. "At the Marlowe fire. Someone wore it. Standing in the smoke. He wasn't helping. He was just watching." Daniel stood slowly. "It wasn't Viola who orchestrated this from the beginning," he said. "It was him. That night, they boarded the cabin windows. Lit no lights. Daniel stayed by the door, rifle across his knees. But at some point, no one knew when, Sarah disappeared. Gone without sound. No prints in the snow. Just the pendant on her bed, still warm." Eleanor broke. She screamed her daughter's name until her voice vanished. Daniel searched for hours. Then days. Tracked footprints into the forest until they stopped at a frozen riverbank. But she was gone. Taken. Like before. 2 weeks later, Eleanor found a package on the porch. Wrapped in plain brown paper. No return address. Inside, a letter. Written in Sarah's hand. "Mom. Dad. They found me again. The witness. He doesn't speak, but I understand him. He's not human, not exactly. He's something else. Something that's been watching families like ours for decades. Not because we're dangerous, but because we remember. And he fears memory more than anything. He let me go, once. When I was young. He let me keep one thing from you, Mom, a lullaby you sang. And now I sing it to myself when I'm afraid. That's how I stay strong. Don't come for me. He'll be watching. But I'm not afraid anymore. I have you in me. Both of you. And wherever I go, you go too. Love, always, Sarah." Eleanor folded the letter, pressed it to her heart, and cried like she hadn't in decades. Not from fear. Not even from pain. From pride. From love. Daniel stood beside her, silent. "I waited 50 years for you," she whispered. He nodded. "And I'd wait 50 more for her." Then he picked up the pendant. Turned it in his hands. And spoke, barely a whisper. "Let him watch." 6 months later. Eleanor opened a community art exhibit in Belhaven. On one wall, framed beneath glass, hung a child's drawing. A cabin. A woman with white hair. A man with a beard. And in the corner, drawn in shadow, was a figure watching from the trees. But below it, written in careful script, were words no one could forget. Some memories cannot be erased. Write in the comments where you're from, let's see how far these stories can spread. And of course, subscribe so you don't miss new exciting stories. See you soon.